Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. As you can see right here in front of us is a very nice looking Collect Day Dimorphodon. Now, this obviously is not the paint scheme that the Collect Day Dimorphodon came in. This was one that I personally repainted myself, but you'll notice the reason it's sitting here is not because we are reviewing it, as I have already reviewed the Collect Day Dimorphodon. It is because we are going to look at some bootleg versions of this figure. And because I couldn't quite locate my actual Collect Day Dimorphodon because it's in storage, I did pull out the repaint that I made just because I wanted to have an original here on hand to show you the difference in sculpting and size and stuff. But I, again, like I said, have some bootlegs that I spotted on eBay about a month ago or so. And honestly, I was really quite impressed with the way they looked online, so I was really intrigued to get them and see them in person, and they were only like $10 or $11. So I pulled the trigger and bought them because I thought that was a very good price if they were going to be anywhere near the size of the Collect Day Dimorphodon. So let's go ahead and bring them in right now. Here is the very first one. Again, you can see it's definitely pretty nice as far as the paint goes. Honestly, I was pretty blown away with how nice this looked. Oddly enough, for some reason his wing is inside of his leg, which I've only recently gotten these out of the box. I'm not sure why that is. Same deal on this side. Let's see if I can get that out of there. There we go. That looks better now. I probably should have used some hot water, cold water to do that, but I did still get that wing out from under there pretty easily. It was interesting that it was under there to begin with. Very strange. But regardless, again, for being a knockoff bootleg, it's pretty darn nice as far as the paint goes, and I was pretty impressed. Let's bring in the second one now. We've got this one, which, as I mentioned in my Schleich Dimorphodon video, that it had a similar paint scheme to the Schleich Dimorphodon. So to prove my point, I will bring in the actual Schleich one, and there you can really see that these are definitely based off of the same paint scheme, or maybe this big bootleg is based off of the Schleich paint scheme. I don't know. I'm not really sure exactly where the inspiration came from, but I could definitely tell you that they are very, very similar in the way they are painted. And the final of the three versions is this one, which is pretty warped in the legs. I'm going to have to, again, hit it with the cold water, hot water deal, or hot water, cold water, which I will actually show you after this video is done, just to show anybody that is unaware of a good way to reposition the legs, just how to do it. But again, this one here, as you can see, probably honestly the ugliest as far as the paint goes out of the three, but it is very heavily based on the paint scheme of the Papo Dimorphodon. So if you ever wanted to have a Collect Day Dimorphodon that looks like the Papo Dimorphodon, here's your chance. And again, to prove that point, here is the Papo Dimorphodon. So once again, you can see that the overall paint scheme is definitely inspired by the Papo Dimorphodon, so pretty cool to have a Collect Day Dimorphodon. Oh, he killed him. That looks like the Papo Dimorphodon. We have to prop the Collect Day one up temporarily because it has a very bad drinking problem and is still a little hungover, I think, from last night. But regardless, very, very similar. You can see that the paint schemes are pretty much the same. Papo's obviously is painted in a much more realistic fashion, but still kind of cool. So anyway, let's get a closer look at these guys. Just because I honestly think it's probably the ugliest of the three, I will start with the Papo paint scheme. But honestly, looking at it, you can see that it's pretty nice. Even the inside of the mouth where that tongue is painted pretty nicely. And there's no super real sloppiness. You can see the eye is a little sloppy, but it actually includes a pretty darn nice gloss. And one thing that is pretty impressive about these bootlegs is that you can see there are all sorts of different tones of coloration that has been included. Even some very nice dry brushing of a lighter green over the dark green here in the featheration on the upper part of the neck. And we come down into the arm. You can see even the wings themselves are pretty nicely painted. And again, this is probably the sloppiest and ugliest of the three, in my opinion, but for being bootlegs, it's really a step above what I would normally expect for a knockoff figure. Even the tail looks pretty decent. Not great, but not bad either. It oddly has somewhat of a gloss to the tail, which I don't like, but Actually, the entire figure in general has a slight gloss, but not anything super glossy. Looking at the opposing side, the teeth are, I think they're kind of meant to have this brown paint on them. I don't really know why, but they're not really sloppily painted either, since I guess that brown is meant to be there. Kind of appears that way because I don't know why else it would be there. But overall, if you would like a Collect Day version of a Dimorphodon with the Papo paint scheme, this is a pretty easy way to go. And again, it's a fairly sizable figure, as the Collect Day Dimorphodon is. Even the underside is actually painted pretty nicely. And it almost appears as though they've included a wash to again bring out the detail of it. One thing that is different though than the Collect Day version is it doesn't have an articulated jaw, which the Collect Day version does have, so the mouth is always open. But honestly, it's not bad for being a bootleg. And then this was the very first paint scheme that I pulled out. Again, look how impressively nice the paint job is on it. The teeth are a little bit sloppy. You can see that the paint is just kind of bunched all over the place on the lower jaw, but the paint itself on the head is actually, there's so many different variations of color and everything that are applied. It's fairly impressive, and it's all very nicely airbrushed on. The eye is a very bright blue with a huge black pupil, and again there's a little bit of sloppiness to the inside of the eye where it seems like the eye is run down more into like the inside area of the eye and not actually on the eyeball itself, but very beautiful as far as the gloss goes. Very real and live looking. And again, as we run down the neck, the paint applied is really beautifully and very naturally done. Once again, looks like the body color of the figure, of the animal, and not just paint. I don't have any idea what the inspiration was behind the paint scheme of this one, or if this is one they just came up with on their own. If any of you have any leads as to where they may have come up with this paint job, because I feel like a lot of the time the people that bootleg these figures don't have an original bone in their body and they steal the paint jobs from somewhere, but I don't know where this one came from. And it leads out to like an orangish type of a tail with some stripes. But honestly, it's very striking, very realistically done, and very natural looking. And the paint job just, again, like I said, has so many different tones of color. They've really gone the extra mile as far as this figure goes. And you can see that this definitely also needs to be hit with the hot water, cold water deal, because that wing is really badly warped and needs to be fixed. So as I said, I will show you guys how to do that if you don't already know. But honestly, it's not at all bad as far as the way it looks. Once again, does not have an articulated jaw, none of them do. But that's again one of the things that are better about the actual original Collect Day Dimorphodon. And then finally we've got the one that I think is my favorite of the bunch. Again, pretty nicely done as far as the paint. The teeth on the bottom jaw all appear to have a fairly sloppy paint applied to them, where it just kind of runs onto the lower jaw. But the paint otherwise looks really nice. Very nicely glossed red eye. And I think the actual eye here is a little bit nicer painted as far as sloppiness goes compared to the other two. I feel like the actual paint applied isn't as many tones or anything. It's not as nicely done as the other two, but at the same time it is still really nicely done, just not quite as nice as the other two. Actually, I shouldn't say that. It's not quite as nice as the previous one, but nicer than the Papo knockoff version as far as the paint goes. But honestly, the figure that they stole the paint scheme from, or the picture actually, I should say, not figure, but the picture that they stole the paint scheme from is very similar to this, so I guess it's not going to have too many different tones. And what they did include does look really nice. Again, looks very natural and is super impressive for being a bootleg figure. Very, very nicely done. Again, no sloppiness really with the teeth too much, except on the lower jaw. You see the tongue is painted in there, but it's not perfectly painted, but still very nicely painted eye again. That beautiful gloss makes it look very real. So again, pretty darn impressive as far as the bootleg goes. And when I spotted these on eBay, I thought to myself, oh, there's no way they'll actually show up looking as nice as that looks in person. And I was really quite wrong. They do still look really, really nice. But in an attempt to show you that the original Collect Day is significantly nicer as far as the sculpting and detailing goes, you can obviously see that there is much more as far as sculpt goes, and it's much more present. It hasn't been bootlegged or anything, so the detail is much more vibrant and much better looking on the original than it is on these bootlegs. Overall, the Collect Day original is definitely nicer, has a much better sculpting job than the ones that bootlegged it, just because you're going to lose detail in the bootlegging process. But at the same time, again, they are still really quite nice. The only difference really is that they don't have the articulated jaw. And actually, if we look at them down here, it appears as though the Collect Day one is actually a little bit bigger than the bootleg version. You can see that even if I straighten this tail out, it's not going to be quite the same length as the actual Collect Day one, but they are pretty close in size, so it's still a pretty darn big bootleg figure. So in an attempt to measure this, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep the tail out straight long enough to measure it. Yeah, we'll try. See what we can do here. So from the tail to the head, you are looking at about just a hair under 14 inches, or about 35.5 centimeters. And for a height, we're looking at just a little under 5 inches, or about 12.5 centimeters. Now these bootlegs are all the exact same size, so I don't have to measure each one individually, but to show you the size difference, I will measure the actual original Collect Day, and the original Collect Day is about 15.5 inches, or about 39 centimeters in length. The height, I believe, yes, is really pretty much the same. It's just honestly the length of the figure is a little bit longer on the actual original Collect Day. So if you are looking to get an entire flock of Dimorphodons for your collection, and you want to have them all look fairly different, if you buy the original Collect Day and then these three, you can have quite a flock going on in your collection, as there are so many different versions to choose from, and you can have all. However, as always with bootlegs, I recommend you purchase the original Collect Day first, as they are the ones that spent the time and money to actually go through making the sculpt and creating the figure in the first place for these people to go ahead and steal and profit off of. So Collect Day should definitely be your original purchase, and I would not recommend purchasing these bootlegs before owning the original Collect Day. But if you do already have the Collect Day figure, then buying these to include with your collection aren't that bad of an idea. And again, I don't really support buying anything previously than the original. As far as bootlegs go, you should never use one of these to take the place of the original. And honestly, bootlegging in general is very, very bad. It takes away profit from companies like Collect Day that actually take the time and money to create their figures. But if you did already purchase the original and you are looking for a paint variant, then these three are actually pretty decent ways to go, as they all do look really quite cool and they're fairly nicely painted. They're not the best quality, they're nowhere near the quality of the original Collect Day, but at the same time they are still pretty darn cool looking. So if you do want to buy them, I will throw links in the description to where I purchased these three myself, so you can go ahead and buy them to throw in with your Collect Day Dimorphodon if you do already own one. So go ahead, click them links, and please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching. Now, the way that I would normally go about setting the leg here back into a good position to stop it from being so warped, you can see that it is fairly warped and bent inward, and you can do this with other body parts like the wing and everything on that other one that was slightly bent. Basically what you want to do, and this is how I do it anyway, turn on this water, turn down a little bit, turn on the water until it's very, very hot, nice and steamy. So there we go, we're steaming a little bit, and then we'll take that leg and we're going to run it under the water. And just leave it there for a few seconds until it really gets nice and hot. And now you can see that it's flexible. I'm going to push it back into the position you want it to be in. Turn on the cold water now, so it's nice and cold, and then put it under the cold water. And then leave it there again for a few seconds. You want to hold it in the position. And there you go, now it can stand. Now that leg is bent back into the position you want it to be in. It may be a little difficult to actually get it to stay because sometimes it'll start to warp back in, but if it does that, just do it a few more times and eventually it should stop and should start to stay in position. But as you can see, now it can stand pretty good.